Okay. I'm going to mute mine as well. All right, welcome to World of Weather. Usually you see Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez, but this is a special edition of World of Weather today, and we're talking about something that we talk about a lot, especially this time of year and into the summertime. When we see thunderstorms or we see really bad weather and we see damage afterwards, a lot of times the question is what caused it? And there's a lot of confusion sometimes between tornadoes and what we call straight line winds. Now, what are those? We'll talk about that in just a minute. But I know Jennifer has talked about tornadoes before. We're going to do a little bit of refresher of what causes tornadoes, how they form, and all of that. So that's what we're going to kick off with. We're going to talk about what causes a tornado, what causes a microburst, and what causes straight line winds. The damage, when you see it, can be a little bit confusing about which is which, and hopefully this will help clear some of that up. So how a tornado forms, you've got those surface winds, but not only the surface winds, you've got really, really strong upper level winds high up in the atmosphere. And what that causes is we get a little bit of spinning, but the spinning is horizontal. Now, a tornado, that you think of tornado as vertical. Now, what causes that? What causes that spinning air to turn vertical? When you have a thunderstorm, a lot of that air is getting a thunderstorm. It's called a thunderstorm updraft. So what that does is it takes that spinning horizontal tube and it actually turns it vertical. And that's when you start to see a tornado form. You see the wall cloud typically first. That's that kind of a wall-shaped cloud that hangs down from a thunderstorm base. And once that starts to form, sometimes, most of the time, you get a tornado that forms out of that. And if it does not reach the ground, then a tornado it's not a tornado, it's a funnel cloud. If it does, it becomes a tornado. And the damage we see from that can be anywhere from very small, if it's a weaker tornado, all the way up to very extensive if it's a stronger tornado. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. We've got that vertical tornado. It's spinning in all directions. We've got really strong wind speeds. So keep that in your mind. That is a tornado. Now let's move on to a microburst. I know Jennifer has gone over microbursts as well, but when we look at the damage back to back to back, this is going to make more sense why we're talking about this. You have a thunderstorm. It starts to weaken. You get some dry air that moves into the thunderstorm. Thunderstorms don't like dry air. They like that humid air, that humid, moist air. That's why we see more thunderstorms in the summertime. When that dry air starts to intrude in the top of that thunderstorm, you get what's called evaporative cooling. We get some of that cooler, drier air, and that drier air starts to sink, and that cooler air starts to sink. And sometimes it happens really, really quickly. And when it does, that's a microburst. So you've got all of this air, it shoots downwards, and then it spreads out. And the force that it hits the ground, that's when we see damage, especially when you get really, really strong wind speeds with that thunderstorm collapsing. Now let's talk about straight line winds. Straight line winds, exactly what it sounds like. You've got winds that are moving in a straight line, all unidirectional, all in the same direction, and that can cause extensive damage as well. Typically, we see straight line winds from thunderstorms. We can also see them from squall lines. That's what I have behind me. There's Atlanta right there in the middle. Squall lines, it's that big line that we typically see on radar. We've got all those scary colors, those oranges, those reds. That's a very strong storm system. And again, all the winds are typically moving in the same direction, so you get straight line winds. The difference is within squall lines, sometimes we can see tornadoes spin up as well. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes to fruition. And right when we start to see those squall lines that have straight line winds and tornadoes, that's when it starts to get a little bit confusing. So the way that we can tell, of course, we can tell on radar if we have rotation or not, but a lot of times people are confused when we get to straight line winds and tornadoes because you hear the wind outside, it sounds ferocious, it sounds dangerous, it sounds sounds scary. And then you see the damage outside, and the first instinct is to say, oh, well, you know, that was a tornado, because you heard the wind, you see the damage, but I'm here to tell you, there can be a lot of different things that can cause damage. So let's talk about tornado damage. And all of this is, we're looking at trees from up above. And I know this is a little bit difficult to see on the screen behind me, but when you have tornado damage, you can see trees have fallen in all different directions. That's what those black arrows are. So you have some that have fallen this way, you have some that have fallen this way, some that are in this direction. The tornado damage, it's more of a chaotic pattern. And that is when the National Weather Service will actually go out and survey some of this damage to see if a tornado actually happened or it didn't happen. And this is one of the things they look at. What direction have things fallen in? Is it all in the same direction? Is it all in different directions? And we talked about this. With a tornado forming, you have winds that are spinning in all different directions with that vertical column of air, and that causes those chaotic patterns. Now, what about straight line winds? This is going to make more sense when you see the damage. All of the trees fall in the same direction. So you've got trees all facing this way, following the pattern of the wind and the strength of the wind as it moved through. Now, what about a microburst? That's when things start to get a little bit more difficult, because you have air that's coming down from the thunderstorm, it hits the ground, and it spreads out. So you're looking for a pattern where you can kind of see the black arrows a little bit, where we've got trees headed in this direction, trees headed in this direction, and that's from the force of the impact as that wind hits the ground and it spreads out. So you're seeing trees in two different directions, and that's where we see a little bit of a gray area between tornadoes and between microbursts. But that's why we have the great folks at the National Weather Service that go out and they're trained to study some of this damage and see what happens. Trees, it's very easy to tell what has happened. It gets more difficult when you're talking about damage to houses, damage to structures. You've got signs. That's when it becomes more difficult to tell what happened, and that's when we rely on what we saw on radar. Did we see rotation? Did we just see wind? Did we see that microburst happen on radar? Because we can see those on radar when you've got the wind headed in two different directions. All of these are equally as dangerous. Tornadoes probably get the most attention because when you see a tornado, it's just scary. You can't really see those straight line winds, and you can't really see a microburst, but you can see a tornado, and I think that's where it gets the most attention as far as the most dangerous. But every single one of these 70, 80 mile per hour winds, at the end of the day, it's still 70 to 80 mile per hour winds. It doesn't matter if it happened in a tornado. It doesn't matter if it happened in straight line winds. It doesn't matter if it happened in a microburst. They all can cause damage, and they all are very dangerous. That's why we always say, you know, a tornado warning should be treated the same as a severe thunderstorm warning, because any of these things can happen. So that leads us to our trivia question for the day. And I kind of just went over this. I spoiled the trivia question just a little bit, but which of these is the most dangerous? Tornadoes, straight line winds, or a microburst? And we looked at all those different things, how they form, the damage that they cause, the damage patterns that they cause. And of course, the answer is D, all of the above. All of them are equally as dangerous. All of them deserve equal attention as far as taking heed to warnings and taking shelter when these move through your area, because they all can do some pretty extensive damage. Now I'm going to talk to my producer real quick, because I know you guys tend to ask questions on here. Mia, if you can hear me, do we have any questions coming up on Facebook, or any comments, concerns, anything?
We don't have anything yet. Can you hear me, Molly?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
Yeah, we don't have any questions right now.
Perfect. Well, that's okay. Hopefully that means that you guys understand. If you didn't, and if you have any other questions, just let me know. You can put them on Facebook. I'll try to get back in there afterwards and answer any questions you have, or you can send me an email, any questions that you might have. Also, today, you see it on the calendar there. May the 4th be with you, for all my Star Wars fans out there. Okay, I hope you guys have a fantastic afternoon, a fantastic evening. We are tracking the chance for some thunderstorms this afternoon, so make sure you join us on CBS 46, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 11. All right, I hope you guys have a fantastic